A new blueprint for aged care reform has been unveiled by the Albanese government. A task force headed by the Aged Care Minister, Anika has handed down a report with key recommendations to help fix issues in the sector. Let's bring in our political editor, Andrew Clennell now. Andrew, just talk us through some of the key findings of the task force.
Well, the task force has found that wealthy seniors should pay more for aged care, as you said in the headlines there, Ash, but doesn't really say how. One suggestion that they appear ready to take up the government is indexation of some payments that are currently occurring, but you don't think that alone would curtail the shortfall in funding. So let's have a look at the challenge put up by this task force. It says, despite increased government investment, 69% of aged care providers made an operating loss in 21-22, an increase from 54% in 2020. It said providers rely on refundable accommodation deposits for capital funding, but this creates liquidity risks and does not directly provide revenue to the sector. It says as demand for aged care grows, there'll be a greater role for participants in funding a sustainable system. Government funding constitutes around 75%, three-quarters of the total costs of aged care funding, and 95% of home care funding. The task force considers this not an optimal or fair mix. Given the increasing wealth of many older people and the declining working age, that is, tax-paying population, there's a strong case to increase participant co-contributions for those with the means to contribute. Well, it'll be a month or two before we know what the government's going to do with that finding, but here are some of the suggested solutions in the report. They suggest the age pension status of the participant would be a fair and simple way to determine participant co-contributions for aged care services. In other words, if you're on the pension, you don't have to stump up as much for your aged care. They suggest indexing the daily accommodation payment twice a year. That would preserve the real value of their contribution to accommodation over time. At the moment, you either use a refundable deposit or this daily accommodation payment or a mix of both. So that would see the value of the accommodation payment increase twice per year for continuing residents. And following an independent review in 2030, they suggest transitioning the sector by 2035 to no longer accept refundable accommodation deposits, provided that independent review finds there is improved financial sustainability. So talk about kicking the can down the road, Ash. They're saying, let's have a look at these refundable accommodation deposits and their future in 6 years' time. And so they say, look, the Royal Commission wanted them phased out. They don't like that people put up this 500 grand and they take the interest to pay for the aged care, but it's too aggressive. It would disrupt the sector too much to act on that straight away. Well, one thing Anika, the Aged Care Minister, did rule out today, because it's been clear there'd be no bipartisan support for this, is an aged care levy or a means test on the family home.
We also rule out any new tax, any levy, and any changes to the treatment of the family home.
So Anika says if we're going to get any reform through on these co-contributions or anything else, we need the other side of politics to support it. That's for the very obvious reason they need them in the Senate, apart from any political bunfight.
Those were some red lines that the opposition had expressed, and we do this in the hope that we'll be able to work together in a bipartisan way to land a sustainable way forward for aged care. If we can land something that's going to stick, and the first of that is that we need, I think, bipartisan support.
The Shadow spokeswoman Anne Ruston told Sky a short time ago, well, Anika only gave me the report Sunday arvo. She only briefed me Friday. This isn't the right approach in terms of getting bipartisan support for any reform, especially when you're not telling us what you're planning to do at the moment.
Well, if you want to be bipartisan, you can't drop me a report on Sunday afternoon of a long weekend when you could have actually been including the opposition and older Australians and their families. I'm happy to talk to the government in good faith and to work with them in good faith, but it's really disappointing that I've had to wait until today to be able to have access to a report that the government's had for nearly 3 months.
The Aged Care Minister, Anika is already being accused in some quarters of squibbing it on this one, but she says all the other governments have squibbed it.
I mean, there were 22 reports into aged care under the previous government. This really is the funding of aged care, a can that has been long kicked down the road. It has been something that has been put off for decades and decades by government, but this is a government that is taking it on.
So are they going to do something or kick it down the road again? Judging by the approach of this government, I'd say they are going to do a few things, like that indexation thing on the accommodation payments I talked about earlier. What they tend to do is reform, but in bit pieces, this government, on various issues. Mike Baird, former New South Wales Premier, former Aged Care CEO, and on the task force, says there needs to be co-contributions to pay for aged care into the future.
We're saying those that have the capacity or the means, not those in the system now, they are grandfathered, and no change is coming for those in the system. But longer term, asking those that have the means, with a strong safety net for those that don't, but those that have the means to contribute something to that increasing funding gap and the demand that's coming.
Yep, plenty of food for thought there. Andrew Clennell, live for us. Thank you for the analysis.